What's up, Sony users? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to go through detailed settings. We're going to go through my detailed camera settings for this Sony A7C. It's quickly become my most used camera. It's portable. It's an extension of the A7 III, which is why I feel like I know it so well. I shot on the A7 III for a couple years, and then I migrated to this, basically just for a smaller body, but it comes with a couple bonus perks. We'll go through those as well. But let's hop into the camera. Let's go through my camera settings top to bottom on this Sony A7C for cinematic video. As we're rolling through these camera settings, drop your comments, questions, or suggestions below, and I will meet you all down in the comments. I'm going to flip the camera around. We'll hop in here. I'll see you shortly. So let's start with my custom setting number one. If you hop onto the top of your camera, you have 3 settings. That's actually a bonus perk of the A7C. The A7C only had 2 custom settings, and I really like having 3. And I basically set my settings up as 24 frames, 120 frames, 60 frames in the order I use them. I use 24 the most, 120 the second most for B-roll and stuff like that, and 60 I'll use occasionally as well. We'll go through these settings top to bottom. Starting on the far left side of the menu, file format RAW, RAW file type compressed, JPEG quality fine, you don't shoot JPEG much, image size large 24, aspect ratio 3:2, APS-C Super 35 auto. Long exposure on, color space RGB, drive mode, single shooting, bracket settings, interval shooting functions. This is if you wanted to shoot a time lapse with photos. Memory right here. This is where you're going to want to come back to and set these custom memory slots up after you get it done. We're on my custom setting number 1. Focus mode, single shot, autofocused, balanced emphasis, focus area wide. This tends to be the most forgiving for autofocus type things. You'll want to change this to achieve certain looks and things like that, but this is what it's set up on standard. So when I click it into number 1, I'm set up with the most forgiving settings. Autofocus illuminator, auto, AF tracking 3, aperture drive standard, AF with shutter on, pre-autofocus on, AF area registration off, focus frame color white, off, on, circle of focus does not circulate, auto frame move amount standard, reset EV comp, ISO setting. I'll generally keep my ISO starting at like 500 because that's the base setting for S-Log2, which is the picture profile I use in this one. So I'll keep ISO base at 500. Metering mode, multi, face priority on, spot metering point center, AEL with shutter, auto, fill flash, 0, ambient in flash, wireless flash off, on. I don't use this stuff that much. White balance, auto. I will go in and change my white balance for the day, but I keep it on auto, and auto is generally pretty darn good with the Sonys. Priority set in auto white balance standard. Picture profile, PP7, and my PP7 is S-Log2, S-Gamut 3. I haven't changed any of this stuff, and this color grading is actually pretty simple if you just use a conversion LUT, and S-Log2 will get you really high dynamic range. That's one way you can push this camera to achieve higher dynamic range and really push your camera to create awesome images with high dynamic range. Off, no limit, 1x, on, peaking settings. Peaking settings off. Well, I'll say one thing here, and I'm actually probably going to change this in the future. If you change it to on, the peaking will come on when you just slap it into manual focus. Right now I have it set up in my function menu, which is right here, and that's how I flip my peaking on, which will basically tell you when you're shooting video what's in focus, what's not in focus, and it's really handy when you're using manual focus. Anti-flicker off, face registration priority on, file format, XAVC 4K, record setting, 24 frames. This is my setting number 1, remember that. I actually don't use S&Q much because I have 120 frames on set up on my number 2 spot, but if you didn't, you can set your slow-mo up on your S&Q, and that's another handy way to do it. Proxy recording off. This would be for if your computer's having a hard time processing the files, you can actually record proxies in camera, or you can make them out of camera. That's pretty complicated stuff, but it is really helpful if your computer is having a hard time processing. Autofocus transition speed 5, AF subject shift 5, auto slow shutter on, initial focus 1x, audio recording on, audio level displays on, audio out timing live, wind noise reduction off, marker displays off. Marker settings, I don't mess around with this too much, but you can change so it'll show you kind of what the frame's going to grab. New movie with shutter off, silent shooting off, release without lens enable on, steady shot on, steady shot adjust auto, display button monitor, finder monitor. I use the monitor most of the time. I'll flip it over to the iDisplay when I need it, which is just some part of the time. Finder frame rate standard, zebra settings. Zebras are good if you need another way to check your exposure. There's some really good videos on the internet about zebra lines. I will link one below. I don't use them a ton, but I think as you're learning exposures and how you want to expose your image, it's really, really helpful. Grid lines, this thing I am big on. Diagonal plus a square grid. I'm going to flip back so you can see what that looks like. It's basically showing you exactly where the center frame and the thirds are. I really use this a lot. And I know some people don't like to. I just think if you want to shoot on center, you want to know exactly where the center is or the thirds are. I like that. That's one thing I would recommend. Live view display, setting effect on, not displayed, auto review off. So we'll go through my custom keys. We won't do it on all the picture profiles because they're all the same, but here are how I set up my custom keys right now. And these are always kind of a work in progress. When I find something I like more, I might tinker with it. Here we go. So this will toggle on my AF manual focus, which is nice. This will toggle off my finder monitor when I do want to use my eye monitor. Focus mode, I do change that from time to time. Drive mode, I do change that, especially shooting photos. ISO, I like it on that right click. That's nice because I keep my shutter on my wheel. APS-C, full frame, that's really nice that this camera can crop in when you need it to, and I keep that right on the bottom. Movie shooting on top, focus hold on the side, and yeah, those are my custom buttons. And then you have your aperture wheel on top, your standard shutters right here on the wheel, and that's how it's set up. So the other thing is we'll hop down to the function menu. This function menu, I will say, is also a work in progress. I do like where it's at, but some of these things are subject to change as I work with it more and decide what I like to use, what I don't like to use. This will change whether you're shooting video or shooting photos. And here's what it looks like for both. Picture profile, ISO, peaking levels. And when you shoot video, audio recording levels, focus style, picture profile, white balance, basically all the major things that I like to use when I'm in and out of video. My dial settings, my dial is basically set up on the shutter, and I think that's how it comes standard. Dial wheel setup, that's how I keep it. I know some people like to flip it, I don't. Normal, touch focus, unlock, audio signals off. And then the rest of the stuff will breeze through pretty quick because it's not things that I change much. Control with your smartphone. This is where you want to go if you want to use the camera to help you shoot selfies, stuff like that. It's pretty helpful. You just connect it to your camera through Bluetooth. Monitor brightness manual, viewfinder brightness auto, gamma display assist. This is an important one if you're going to shoot in log profiles. This thing will help you expose your logs. It basically throws a little LUT over the top, or it makes your image look more normal, not more flat, and it makes it much easier to expose S-Log2, S-Log3. S-Log2 is what I shoot on in this camera. I was intimidated to start shooting logs for a long time, but so glad I did. If you really want to push your footage, start shooting log footage right away. Start learning how to expose it and use this gamma assist because it's very, very helpful. Volume settings 5. This stuff I'll go through pretty quick. Standard 1 minute standard. Cleaning mode, if you do need to clean it, that's nice. Touch panel only. You may want to change this if you use the touch panel or not. I use it a little bit. This is all going to set up in the beginning when you set up your camera, your language, stuff like that, your date and time, formatting your stuff. This file settings is kind of nice if you want to organize your file based on, you know, what kind of camera you're using or whatever. You can change how this works. All right, and that is custom dial setup number 1. Let's hop over to custom dial setup number 2. And we're not going to go through it a ton because the main difference between 1 and 2 is just the frames per second and how I set it up that way. All right, so here we are, custom dial settings number 2. You can see in the beginning, Shutter's at 1/250. I didn't say that for the other one. I set my stock shutter at, for 24 frames per second, I set my stock shutter at 50. I set my stock aperture at 2.8, and I set my stock ISO at 500. I do that all the same on all my picture profiles so I can work through them simultaneously and I don't have to change settings. When I hop over, it's just kind of it gives you a starting point to work from. And you always want to shoot your shutter double your frame rate. If you're new to video, that's something that's very important if you want your footage to look good. So at 24, you put your shutter at 50 or 48. If you have it at 120, you put your shutter at 250. So let's hop into the menu now and we're going to check out dial custom settings number 2. Raw, compressed, all the same things. Same, all the way through, same. Okay, and then, so here we're gonna set this to XAVCS HD. That allows me to set my frame rate down here into 120. I shoot 120, 100 so I can get the highest quality out of my 120. Again, I don't use S&Q a lot because S&Q is already set up right here for me, which basically means slow motion. So I set it up at 120. All this stuff is the same. And then the big things you need to know from here is I set my shutter at 1/250. I set my base ISO at 500. My picture profile stays the same, which is S-Log2. And that really is the big difference between custom dial setting number 1 and number 2. That's the frame rate of the video rate of which I shoot. And then we'll hop over to number 3. And number 3, to be honest, is the one I'll use the least frequently. But I'm starting to use it more, and I think 60 frames per second has a lot of good applications. It's just when you go 60 versus 120, there are some small differences, but if you just want easy, shooting it in 120 is going to give you the ability to slow it down a little more. And really, I look at it, when I want to shoot 60 frames is when I want to create a little more motion blur in the slow motion. That's kind of my thought process there. But we'll hop on over to the settings here. All the same thing, starting with the beginning. I keep it universal that way, and I only change my frame rate, so when I hop into the camera and I change things, it's not changing on me from one to the other to the other. That would make it confusing to work with. A lot of the things I shoot, I'm trying to shoot very quickly, and I want to work fast, and I want to have a cohesive workflow. So that's why all of these settings are the same. The only thing I change is the frame rate between 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, when we're going to shoot in 60 frames per second on this one, we go down to XAVCS HD. And then 60p 50, that gives us the highest quality 60. If you wanted to save memory or something like that, you could use a lower quality. But I really try to push the quality out of my camera. And guys, those are the kind of the main differences here. You can see what my function menu looks like quickly. And then if you're shooting video, that function menu is actually going to change. Just something to note for yourself there. And yeah, these are the settings that have worked for me. I've spent a couple years now messing around with Sony's. Originally started on the A7 III, used the A6400, used the A7C. Been a really big fan of these cameras. I think if you're into both video and photo, they give you really high quality bang for your buck. All right, I just flipped this camera around. If you guys have any questions, drop them below in the comments. Thanks so much for hanging out. I hope this stuff helps. What do you think of this macro lens on the front of my camera right now? I use that to film today. The 50 2.8, I found it to be one of my handiest lenses that I don't think gets talked about enough. We can talk more about all this stuff. If you have any questions, drop them below in the comments. Thanks so much for hanging out today. I appreciate you guys. Do me a favor, if you enjoy this kind of thing or you want to learn more, subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and I will catch you all back here for the next one.